Welcome to Drivetime Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Nett Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Today, when I look around in the world, what do I see? I see footprints that man have left on the sand while walking through times. I see fruits of our ambitions, figments of our imaginations, and I ask myself, when will it end? When will it end? It is plain to see, universally this land is not bountiful as it was, simply because in his quest for success, nothing stands in man's way. All rivers run dry, soon the birds will fly, the mountains will be no longer high. And when I really think of it, I just wonder why, oh why. I see charity deplored, equal rights totally ignored, wisdom and ingenuity working in accord, simply to afford such inventions as thermonuclear warfare and environmental warfare. And I wonder now, where do we go from here? Prophets everywhere gaze upon the horizon and declare that judgment will come as the savage hands of unscrupulous men defile everything pass by. Time is running out as we eat and drink, species at the brink of being extinct. And I think no one can deny that the price of progress is high.
Welcome to Drivetime Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Nett Radio, taking you above and beyond.
All right, and of course with that we say a very special good afternoon to everybody wherever you may be in the universe, whether you're here at home in Trinidad and Tobago, streaming all around the globe or in the Caribbean, wherever you are. We are happy to have you here on New Era TT Radio as we welcome you inside our Drivetime Exchange as we take you home in fine style. Okay, and of course we are marshaled by none other than journalist extraordinaire himself, Mr. Tony Fraser. So Tony, good afternoon to you. How are you doing?
I am good, man. And you are doing well yourself?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for asking.
Yeah. You know, those two programs of the last couple of days, they're still on my mind. The music, the analyses, etc.
I am telling you, it was really fantastic. Really, really fantastic.
For our listeners who didn't tune in, we were wishing the great mighty Sparrow, the King Sparrow, happy 90th birthday. And we had quite a lot of his music on. Thanks to our good friend Zeno Constance, who supplied the music, and Charles made some of the selections. And in the studio, in our virtual studio, we had the likes of Professor Liverpool chalked us. We had Dr. Rudy Otley, and we had Annette Fitzpatrick, and of course Dr. Rudolph Otley, did I say his name? Chalked us, and Zeno Constance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And we had a wonderful time. This afternoon we're going to a different subject, something we attempted once. We did the politics and the legal aspects of it. Now we want to come this afternoon to deal with one some of the accounting procedures as reported in the newspaper recently, and of course, how are we going to reconstruct this social welfare program, which everybody agrees has to exist in some form or the other. The challenge from the time it was started is to make it one, something that would assist people who are on the margins, who have not been able to make it into regular society like most of us. And of course, how we manage it over the period of time. And we have two persons to deal with that. We have an accountant, David Walker. I'm seeing him on the screen. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Tony. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be speaking with your listeners. I know we have some overseas as well, so welcome to everybody.
Wonderful. And we have Dr. Marlene Arts, economist. She hasn't joined us yet, as far as I can see.
No,
Is
not
she
yet.
in the waiting room? No, okay. I presume she's going to get here soon enough. And she's going to talk about how we refashion this program to serve the needs of people who have been left out for one reason or the other. And we can talk about that also. All of the people who are being marginalized in the society and really have little chance of making it into the formal economy and formal society and all of that. The most recent reporting on the whole issue, in addition, of course, to all of the legal challenges that have been planned, you know that what the new government has done is to fire the contractors. I think the number I heard is 300 plus contractors. Of course, they employ, and I hear the figure that goes between 10,000 to 20,000. I don't know what the true figure is. It gives you some indication of the, if you like, the maladministration of the organization. When you have that kind of variation, nobody seems to know what the real number is. And of course, over the years, over the decades, really, the program has been plagued by ghost gangs, by violence, all kinds of things that have happened. And just to put a little perspective on the whole program, it started in the late 1950s, and it was started because of the PNM being beaten in that southwest peninsula area by some of the Butlerites in the area. And therefore, the government saw it fit to find a way to incorporate and to take supporters away from Butler. And therefore, the development program was started. It was called Crash Program at the start. And I have spoken to Ferdy Ferreira, who was very much part and parcel of the whole arrangement, he being a chief supporter of the PNM and an ally of Dr. Williams. And that was the kind of formation that was required. And from the start, it's not a new phenomenon to say that one of the intentions was to give people a period of time in the program, have them gain some skills, gain some revenue and so on, and that they would move on to more productive, more self-sustaining work over a period of time. And we've heard that reframe over the decades since then. And every political party in office charges the previous one from corrupting the program, and so it goes on between both of them. We are at this juncture here, and the most recent issue, and the one that I want to start on with David Walker, the accountant, is this business of there not being an auditing on the program since 2009. I think there were 1 or 2 years in between there when an audit was supposed to have been carried out. But for all intents and purposes, over that long period of time, and very importantly, with the two major parties in government over the period, this has happened. David, welcome to the program, and thanks for being here. Can you give our listeners, our viewers, an appreciation of this, accounting process which has to be audited? how does it fit into a program like the social welfare program, whatever you call it, dude, whatever the name, Cepep, etc., etc. What is required of the company in the process of having their accounts audited?
Thank you for that introduction. You taught me a few things about the history of the program and the process. I'm pleased for that. I was
David,
aware of,
is it possible that you could either get a little closer to your set, or you may have to speak up a little bit?
okay, I'll bring it in a little closer. Tell me, is this okay?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. There's also a volume setting here that okay. We have been hearing about the problems with accounting and auditing of Jude or Cepep for as long as most of us can remember. So this is nothing new. It is a most disgraceful situation because accounting for the expenditure of money on the type of work that they do is relatively straightforward. There should be no excuse for financial accounts or audited statements to be 10 years or more behind time. In that scenario...
Sorry, David, before you go on, just for the sake of our listeners, can you explain the difference between the two functioning, the auditing and the accounting?
Yes, certainly. This applies to every company, be it in the private sector or the public sector. Accounting is largely an internal process where management seeks to measure, document, total, analyze, etc. the passage of money through the organization. How much goes in, how much is earned, how much is paid to various parties, analyzed by the different functions. So you would have expenses under salaries and wages, you would have expenses under traveling costs and so on. So at the end of each accounting period, which is usually 1 calendar year, you would expect an organization to present a set of accounts that says, we generated $2 million in income, we spent $500,000 on X, 300,000 on Y, and so on, and at the end of it, you will calculate how much has been earned as a net profit or how much has been lost as a result of the activities of the organization. So that's the financial accounting part.
Mm-hmm.
Now
that's an internal exercise that goes on within the organization.
That's the point I was about to come to. That is internal, and it is in effect led by the very people who are responsible for making all the financial decisions in the company. Auditing fills the breach so that the auditing process is designed so as to obtain a professional view of whether the accounts, the financial accounts as just described, present what is described in the accounting terminology as a true and fair view of the state of the affairs of the organization. So they are a check and balance that would give the owners of the organization, in this case the government, the confidence that the figures that are presented by the organization itself are in fact correct and can be relied upon for decision making. Let me make another point. What it does not do. Auditing is not the same as fraud detection. An auditor is not mandated to seek fraud. If an auditor comes across fraud, they are duty bound to report on it. But it is not a primary responsibility of the auditor to go in search of fraud. There are other specialists who will engage in that kind of activity if requested to do so. And a lot of us would have heard the term forensic audit and so on. So the forensic auditor is the one. If there is any hint that there might be false reporting of the finances of the organization, that's when your forensic auditor comes in.
So let's assume, David, that the auditor, well, first of all, the accountant internal to the company finishes his or her auditing, and then the auditor comes in. Is it that, and you will answer this as you go along, is it that the auditor should be within the organization or independent of the organization that checks over what has been done? But in addition to that, you seem to be hinting, more than hinting really, saying that it does not mean that even after the audit that there isn't the possibility of fraud having taken place.
Absolutely right. To deal with the last part first, it is specifically documented that an auditor's role does not include the seeking of fraud, but it goes on to state in various other sections of the guidance that we operate by that we should always keep our eyes open for instances of possible fraud. So there is a term for it which I can't recollect right now, but let me paraphrase that the auditor is, I'm trying to remember the terminology, is the auditor is not a bloodhound, and the auditor is more of a guard dog rather than a bloodhound. So the auditor is not going searching for it. But in the normal course of work of an auditor, you would expect them to pick up and report on a significant percentage of the instances of fraud. Because the auditor verifies balances, totals, gets third-party corroboration of information of loan balances, outstanding, etc. So a major fraud should not get past a competent auditor.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm going to come back to you in a second. But just to recognize Dr. Marlene Atz, economist at the University of the West Indies, and somebody who has taken something of a controversial seat in the parliament, in that she has been named, well, it is said that the term is not in the constitution, but nevertheless she has been made what we have grown to understand over the years as an independent senator. Welcome to the program, Dr. Atz. I think your microphone is not on.
Yes, okay, yes, there I am. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to chat with you and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and to serve as an independent or whatever title is being put on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because I think that is the point that is being lost, that those of us who are appointed are there to ensure that we speak on behalf of the persons, the 1.5 or whatever number we call it today, less the number of people in the parliament.
Right, and that's great. I'm glad to have you on the program. Dr. Atz has, talked about for a long time. I read some of her statements. Even in today's Trinidad Guardian, the Business Guardian, she has been at gone to some length to talk about the economic transformation that has to take place in the social welfare program, whatever we call it. And I suspect when this government is finished doing whatever it chooses to do, it will come up with another name to stamp its imprimatur, I think that's a word, on the program, and hire its people and so on and so on. Dr. Atz, before you came, we had Mr. Walker, who is an accountant, talking about something just went across my mind. Sparrow and Mr. Walker and all of that.
Good morning, Mr. Walker. Absolutely. I think it crossed your mind the same time it crossed mine.
Yeah, he went through the whole process of the requirement for accounting and auditing at the end of a financial year, and what is the process that has to be done in the circumstances. I want to go back to him before we join Dr. Atz on talking about the economic transformation that has to take place. So, Mr. Walker, I'm going to call you David to stop this, Mr. Walker, coming across my
This is
mind.
the imagery coming through.
Yeah. David, so... David, so I take it when you move from the stage of first internal auditing, internal accounting, external auditing, and you move to another stage, is it because there has been found within the auditing process some cause for pause, as it were?
Yes, certainly. There are several ways that one could bring an external audit, a forensic auditor into an organization. It could be the management themselves who have concerns with something that they've seen within the organization. There could be an internal audit function, which we haven't spoken about. But the internal audit function themselves could raise red flags and suggest that you get an external party in that is completely independent of all the operators within the organization. So the mandate for the work of the external audit, the forensic auditor could come from a variety of sources. But at the end of the day, the work is fairly straightforward and well defined. It is to investigate whatever is required by the particular organization. So they will set out what they want the forensic auditor to do. They would usually offer the forensic auditor a certain amount of latitude to vary the requirements based on what they find as they go along. Because almost by definition, the fact that you're falling in a forensic auditor means that you aren't sure of what it is we're looking at. So in that situation, we find the forensic auditor will come in and do all the necessary investigation. But I have to say that we aren't at that stage yet, in my view, with Cepep, because Cepep has not even done the original audit.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is to ensure that those audits are done expeditiously. And if I could borrow someone else's hat and have that authority, one of my performance criteria for the people on the boards of directors of all state enterprises is how quickly can you get your audited statements up. I would give you until, say, the end of next year to get all your audited statements up to date, and up to date meaning perhaps up to 2 years ago. But we really have to make that a priority, because other than that, ministers and everybody else is operating in the dark. We're making management decisions, leadership decisions without a factual basis, without the data with which to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that is one of the biggest priorities in getting more effective performance out of the tax dollars that we put into these enterprises.
Now, does Cepep fall under the purview of the Auditor General, or is it a private audit that has to take place?
It falls under the purview of the Auditor General, but we need to be aware that the Auditor General has the authority to utilize external auditors. Because we have so many state enterprises now, it is almost impossible because of human resource for the Auditor General to do all themselves. So under the legislation, they have the authority to bring in external auditors from time to time. And let me just tell you a little bit of my background with that. When I returned from scholarship many, many years ago, I'm not going to tell the listeners how many years ago I came back, I was at the Auditor General Department. So I served there for 3 years. So I understand their processes and so on very well. At the time, we probably had about 6 state-owned enterprises. This is late 70s, early 80s. And it's mushroomed over the years to what it is now.
Yeah, I remember it reached something like 100 plus state enterprises, and we had the Frank Rampasad team that went in. That was during the NAR period, and they banned X number, they said they shouldn't exist, and the others were downright corrupt and not responding in terms of what they contributed to the national economy, and so on and so on. And it went down to, again, I'm trying to tax my memory, I don't know, 13, 14, 20 or so. But within one other term of government, it went back up, perhaps even past the 100 and plus whatever it was. So that's a social welfare program. Let me go to Dr. Atz now, the economist, the developmental economist. And we heard from Ferdy Ferreira in our first program that the origins, if you like, of the social welfare program, it was called Crash Program in its first iteration. That what transpired is that the PNM did not do very well in the 56 election in the Point Forte, Deep South St. Patrick area. And Dr. Williams, I presume, found out why that was so. A lot of the people were voting for the Butlerites of the period. They had a long connection with the Butlerite movement, and Dr. Williams determined that he had to fashion the social welfare program to win votes from the Butler Party, which was really going out of its existence. And since then, the notion was that we bring people in who could not find work in the regular economy, and we gave them a period of time of earning revenue to look after their families, etc. And they were supposed to graduate to some other form of employment. Well, as we know, that did not happen. And Ferdy made the point that a lot of these programs turned into voter banks, as he called them, in that they were converted from the original purpose into this political initiative on the part of the PNM. And interestingly, after every election that the PNM lost, and the opposition screamed and shouted when it was in opposition about transforming the program, and they simply converted it into their own voter banks. So that's a situation before you, Dr. Atz. How do we begin to transform these things into productive institutions? Your speaker.
Yes, yes. You gave me you saved the biggest question for me. That was deliberate.
No, yeah. You're the economist.
Yeah, but I'm not a politician. Economics and politics sometimes, very often, they don't mix. It's oil and water.
And that's a very important thing, which I am going to land in your lap sooner or later. So go ahead.
I think one of the things I want to say from the outset, there is nothing inherently wrong with social welfare programs. There will be always citizens in your country, in your economic space, who, for whatever reason, reasons of physical, inability, some kind of disability, differently abled, weren't as successful in the education system, or they weren't in alignment with the education system, or just general life circumstances, they're not able to be absorbed into what we will consider the mainstream kind of employment. So there will always be an opportunity. If you think of any one of the countries around the world, the so-called developed countries, you have in the United States, you have the welfare system. In the UK, you have, where you can actually get a council, you get exemptions from certain things because of your circumstances, but there are systems in place. And I'm aware, certainly in the United Kingdom, so in the US, you will have things like unemployment checks that you get because of your circumstances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they may have in some cases, but they don't have a program like our Cepep program, for example. So Cepep, in addition to some of the other social welfare grants, etc., that we provide for that cohort of our citizenry who are unable to be absorbed into the regular work stream. So there's no problem with that per se. I think the issue arises.
And sorry, Dr. Ads. And in a way, more than in a way, the general society and surely the government has a responsibility here to take care of the citizens, because in many ways we fail them, and therefore we have to assist them out of that situation.
Absolutely. And you know, the issue is that, you know, and you went back to the days of Eric Williams and what Mr. Ferreira would have shared with you on the last occasion. But let us take our history, not as far back as 1962, but when we were enjoying the petrodollar days, etc., there was sufficiently a lot of money flowing through the country, no pun intended, as the oil was, to allow us to do all sorts of things, including to have inflated social welfare programs. And when I say inflated, not that they aren't necessary, and I want to make that point abundantly clear, they're necessary, but without the checks and balances. So I was listening to Mr. Walker a little while ago, and the fact remains that if you are running an enterprise, which according to the newspapers, what is reported in the newspapers, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, because it's not a little bit of money that they've gotten, a billion, and I want to be very clear in terms of articulating, it's the B, not the M, billions of dollars. It is more than a travesty that there have not been the audits in place, because it means that this is $6 billion of the country's money for which there have not been checks and balances for whatever reason. And this is not about casting aspersions, but it is $6 billion. It is $6 billion that we know of. It could be more, it could be less, who knows? But $6 billion is a figure that is in the newspapers. So I think it is a cause for concern for us in the country that we have not had the kinds of audited accounts that we need to have for this amount of money. No business, no private sector business would be run like that and not have accounts on an annual basis. I mean, it's a requirement. You know, you have a requirement, as Mr. Walker explained, to have these accounts. So that's the first thing. So fast forward to where we are now, and the country is challenged economically speaking. We know what has been happening in the energy sector for the last 15 or more years. We know the impact that COVID-19 would have had in terms of our economic ecosystem. We know that recovery has been low, slow, bits and spurts. We know that certainly in the near future, things are not going to rebound to those glory days where we had a lot of money flowing through the country. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, very early in their tenure, came out and announced that things are looking a little more dismal than they had anticipated. We're talking about an $11 billion deficit for fiscal 2025. So all of the signals are there that it is not business as usual.
Dr. Ads, just explain, sorry, but you know, one of the responsibilities we have here is to explain things to people. And so the economists understand the deficit and so on.
All right,
but explain that a little bit for
what it means. So every year when the budget is read towards the end of September, the first part, because that's the end of the financial year for the government. That's the government's year is run 1st of October to 30th of September. So you'll hear us talk about fiscal 2025. So we're currently in fiscal 2025, the financial year for 2025. And at the start of the fiscal year, so when the Minister of Finance, when Minister Tanku rises around the end of September, the first week in October, well, the end of September, I would imagine, because we want to get that agreed to and passed so that the country can continue to run. We'll have money available for the ministries to discharge their responsibilities. So when Minister Tanku rises to make his maiden speech, his first speech as the Minister of Finance in a couple of months' time, he is going to estimate, he and his team in the Ministry of Finance, they will estimate the kinds of revenues that the government will get from the energy sector, from royalties from the energy sector, from the companies that operate, the amount of money that they're going to collect in taxes, corporation taxes, personal income taxes, etc., which is why the conversation around the Revenue Authority was a significant conversation, which is why there was a lot of noise around the property tax, because that is a source of revenue for the government. But we're not going to go into those things this afternoon. So when Minister Tanko and his team pull together those estimates of revenue, they're going to say, all right, we estimate that we're going to get around $51 billion in revenue from all of these various sources. They then have to come to the tricky part and estimate all of the expenditures. So they're going to have to pay public servants' salaries. They're going to have to pay all of the arrears. They're going to have to pay all of the contractors. Some of the things that the present government, the new government, and I'm still using new just to distinguish, has indicated that they found are outstanding payments, any loans, any debts that the government has that they have to make interest payments on, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really that accounting. So you have, as I said, I forget the figure I quoted, about $50 billion in revenue. And then you will realize that when you add up all of your bills, it's coming up to about $60 billion. So the difference between the 60 billion and the 50 billion is that $10 billion, what we call the deficit. And the deficit is simply the difference between the amount of revenue that you earn and the amount of money that you plan to spend. Now that is happening in September. You know what's going to happen, and pardon my, breaking into local parlance, government doesn't know what is actually going to happen in that intervening period, which is why you have the mid-year review, and Minister Tanku would have presented what we loosely call the mid-year review. It's called the supplementary appropriation, meaning that we're now halfway through the year, the financial year, and we realize that money not coming in as we thought it was going to come in, or we have to spend more. So we want to kind of move around the money a little bit. So what was given to this particular ministry, realize they are spending it, or they don't have need to spend it. So we want to move it to another ministry that has some urgency, or we want to ask for some more money altogether. And that is where the mid-year review comes in to say, well, we're not looking good, or we're looking good. We need some more money. We need to move around some things. This is justification for moving it around. I want to put some more money into healthcare. So let me go back a little bit to COVID-19. So COVID-19 was one of those very good examples, useful examples for us as a population, because everything revolved around the Ministry of Health. So if the Ministry of Health needed to have an additional $5 billion, the government would have found the $5 billion for it, because COVID-19 was a crisis, unanticipated, so that when the budget was read in 2019, no one could have anticipated. I mean, we saw it happening in the rest of the world, but no one could have anticipated the impact it would have had in Trinidad and Tobago. So by March 2020, when we declared COVID-19 to be on our shores, the Ministry of Finance then became the most important, well, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Finance became the most important ministries. Whatever the Ministry of Health needed, they had to get, because they were the primary agents dealing with it. So that is a kind of very useful and real example in terms of how things have to be adjusted ever so often. So that leaves us with the deficit. So coming back to my example, 50 billion will be expected, and this is hypothetical. I don't want people to go and quote that I said it would be 50 billion. And then we realize that expenditures are 60, and your best estimate is that you will have a deficit of $10 billion. And then circumstances may change throughout the financial year, and you realize, hang on a moment, this 10 billion could get lower, or it could actually increase. Your 10 billion could reduce to 8 billion because you found, and when I say found, some extraordinary circumstance, and you find that yourself getting more revenue. And that happened to us in 2022. The government at the time enjoyed some additional revenue because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, causing energy prices to increase, and Trinidad and Tobago benefited. It was almost like manna falling from heaven for us. So we had a little reprieve at that time. So that is essentially what the budget deficit, and all governments will try to bring their budget into balance, but we have not been able to do that because our primary source of revenue is still from the energy sector. And that has not been enjoying the best of economic health and financial health for many years. So we're still going to find ourselves with that imbalance in terms of the deficit. And of course, the question then arises, how do you close that gap between your revenue and your expenditures? And a number of options. One, you borrow either on the domestic market or on the international market, or you draw down on our reserves, including things like our Heritage and Stabilization Fund. So that is where we are, and it is in that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that's your lesson, Econ 101. 101. Econ 101. And that gives us a sense of how the country is run, where the revenue comes from, and so on. And part of that revenue stream, whether you borrow it or whether it's part of what you earned, if we talk about $6 billion over the period of time, I think I calculated something like $500 million a year going to this program. And so the point I want you to take up is, how do we make this 500 billion? We're using a figure, $500 million annually productive, so we don't add it to the debt into the following year.
All right. So there are a number of things. When Cepep started, taking you back to 2002, it was framed to deal with those persons, some of whom I would have referred to earlier, semi-skilled, unskilled workers who can't quite fit into mainstream jobs, but it will be a dual function. It will be to provide some temporary support for these individuals, but they would take care of the public spaces. So it would be the community environment protection, something program. I forget, but it was environment. So you would see them going around, cutting the grass, pruning trees, and then they added on another element to their operations in terms of dealing with carcasses and those sorts of things, roadkill, etc., etc., etc. So Cepep's role, and I think, going on memory, because I was closer to it back when it started, it was also meant to focus on female heads of households, providing them with the opportunity to earn revenue, to look after their children, etc., etc. So it was really meant to deal with those our compatriots who were among the more vulnerable in the society, but able-bodied. They're not unable to find work, but they just don't necessarily have the skills, the technical skills or the academic skills to find jobs in the mainstream. So fast forward to where we are in 2025, 23 years later, I am not aware of any evaluation that might have been done of Cepep, separate and apart from the Joint Select Committee having done their reporting, the Joint Select Committee meeting on Cepep. I am not sure of any internal self-assessment in the same way in which Mr. Walker spoke about an internal audit that might have been done, that might have led to an external audit. I'm not aware of any self-assessment. It may or may not have been done, because that self-assessment would have been a useful guide for the managers, the government, the policymakers, the persons responsible for Cepep, to see whether or not Cepep was in fact fulfilling its mandate, and how you would be able to determine that. Number of people who were employed, number of people whose circumstances improved because they were part of the program. So there would be clear metrics and measurements to determine, because, if I go out to work in my regular job, one of the reasons that you're working is because you want to be able to have money to buy food, you want to be able to have money to pay your rent, you want to be able to have money to send your children to school, to buy clothing, etc., to improve your circumstances in life. So there has to be that built-in mechanism for us to measure whether or not there is that return on the investment. So the 500 million, that we're kind of rounding it off as the annual investment, we're saying, what is the return on that investment? So it has to be in terms of the number of persons who have benefited, and I'm not talking contractors, I'm talking about the vulnerable people who we're trying to lift out of poverty. How has this program caused their lives to be improved? Because if you're spending money and we can't see that, we're getting the return on the investment, then we have to kind of recalibrate how we're spending this money. So this brings us to where we are now, and what I think is, as expressed in today's newspapers by myself and Dr. Henry, the upgrade of Cepep. So rather than wringing our hands every couple of years and saying, well, let's kind of revisit the program and see how we can reimagine the program, I'm saying that there exists. Cepep is not unique. It's a name it's a Trini, it's identified as a Trinidad and Tobago program, but the concept of having programs to help vulnerable communities is not new. It's not rocket science. And one of the things that I referenced was this program in Argentina, the Jefes and Jefas de Hogar, where you essentially persons who are not able to be absorbed into the mainstream, you teach them skills, you involve them in construction projects, etc. You teach them some basic financial literacy, but you also attach to that program and their participation in that program that they go and they get skills so that they graduate. There is a pathway out of this program, that's this welfare program, for want of a better word. And it is something that I have shared with policymakers in the past in terms of this Jefes de Hogar, and really capitalize on the fact that for all intents and purposes, our Cepepers, as Pat Bishop used to call them, don't work a full day. So whether they go, and for those of us some of us on the call might remember the thing like the school leaving program long time. I don't even know if it still exists. But, some persons who may not have completed their education, there could be a school leaving program for them so that they work in the day and then 1 or 2 evenings, they go into a school leaving program so that they get basic skills so that they can improve themselves and ultimately improve their chances of providing for their families. So you're not tied to a Cepep wage every week or every fortnight or monthly, as the case might be, so that you also create space for other persons to come into the program, learn some skills, as it were. I mean, one of the things I've always noticed with some Cepep ladies like to look good like everybody else. So you don't have to do academics. You go into cosmetology, you go into something that can afford you the opportunity to learn a skill that you can then monetize and earn some income, even as you are weaning yourself off of the Cepep program. So that is a consideration, and it's really a way of not to use the adage of giving a fish as opposed to teaching someone to fish. It's really a way of allowing people to self-actualize in their own space. You're providing them with some support initially, but you are, while they're on this support, you're giving them the opportunity to learn some skills that they can then use to go off and earn an income for themselves. And I always think about 2 countries I visited, in my professional life as a consultant. One, Jamaica, you're going to a tenement yard and you see young women doing hair braiding. They have full-on salons, by the side of the road, and people are people are sitting there and having their hair braided or having their nails done, as the case might be. I mean, we're ignoring sanitation issues, etc., but they're sitting there and they're having their hair done or they're having their nails done in this tenement yard. And I also saw that in Haiti a couple of years ago, and I'm saying, this is a way in which people are, regardless of their circumstances, yes, they're in the lower echelons of the society, but they are, honing a skill that they can actually monetize to earn some income for themselves. So it doesn't mean that you're perpetually dependent on the state to provide you with some kind of financial resource.
So before we go into the different possibilities by way of programs, let me go back to David to hear, what do we do now about these outstanding accounts from 2009 as reported to 2023? One, is it possible to do them after all of this period and get real results? Because we don't know where that document, in fact, it has been reported as that a lot of documents have gone missing over the period of time. And is it possible at all to come back to those documents which exist to do something like a serious auditing of the process? You got to unmute.
Right. Certainly, it's anybody attempting to do an audit of an organization, anything beyond 5 years, will face significant challenges with finding documents. And bear in mind that if people will engage in untoward activities, they will ensure that the documents are difficult to get hold of. So we start off expecting difficulty, but most competent audit firms have the expertise to do the best possible job that they can with the documents that are available. bear in mind that in modern society, in a modern economy, every transaction has two sides at the very least, usually a payer and a receiver. And most of it goes through the banking system. So it is a lot easier today than it was 20, 25 years ago to trace things that somebody has attempted to hide or has simply lost the document for. There usually is some backup documentation in someone else's hand. And auditors have the prerogative, they have the authority to write to third parties seeking that information. So it can be done. And my view is that it must be done. How do we really assess the value, the performance of these organizations over the past 10 years and construct a way forward unless we have that? It is impossible in my view.
Yeah. In fact, you answered in part the question I was going to ask. Is it valuable now for us after all this period of time to expect anything like accounts, audited accounts, to audit those accounts that can be of value going forward? Or should we simply say this is a done deal and we write it off and then let us move forward?
But if I may, Tony, to Mr. Walker, I seem to recall, I'm seeing it in front of me, the CEO of Cepep saying that many of their files and their accounts were lost. There was a fire, there was some kind of disaster, and their accounts. I seem to recall that. Was that? No, Tony is nodding, but is that?
Yes.
My recollection correct?
Yes, you are right. It has been reported that a lot of the accounts are not only in fires, but in so-called misplacement and so on. Somebody who does not want the accounts to be seen ensures that they are not seen. If there are funny things going on and somebody's in a position to ensure that those documents are never seen, never audited, never accounted for, then they will make the effort so to have them disappear into thin air. So I come back to David. Is it valuable now to us to seek to do this work? How can it assist us, in fact, in restructuring and reorganizing for productive activity of the CPF program, or whatever it is to be called in the future?
Yeah, I am very clear that there is still a lot of value to be had from going back to those periods and doing that work. Even by determining the areas of weakness, we gain the ability to ensure that we prevent those from recurring in the future. So we have to go back, we have to get as much information as we can, and we have to learn from the mistakes or the calamities that befell the accounting system. And we need also to spend some time, we talk about it a lot, we talk about digitization. With proper digitization of our accounting record, most usually in a secure environment, there would be external copies of all the data that's held on the internal system, including scanned copies of documents. So we also have to ensure that we procure systems going forward that will ensure that we are never in this situation again, where somebody can say to us that documents simply have been lost in a fire or floods or whatever. That should not be an excuse in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
What I also love to see is some kind of either incentive or big stick, whichever you prefer, or maybe even both, in the performance measurement of the people who run these companies, chairpersons, the board of directors, especially, in bringing those audited statements up to date. I'll give you my personal experience. I don't know if you're aware, I was the chairman at Studley Park Enterprises for a while. And in that time, we were able to bring our audited statements up to date to 2 years behind the current date. And that was at the point in time of my departure, and we were about to embark on the following year. It can be done. I would like to see it, it may be controversial, but I would like to see either a financial incentive or a financial penalty based on the performance of the board of directors and especially the chairperson in bringing those audited statements up to date. As long as they can carry on every year not producing the audited statements and nothing happens to them, they stay in their position for another 5 years, it is not going to change. I believe that there should be some kind of incentive or punishment.
Yeah. One question before we go to the break and come back to talk in full about replacement programs, David, is can the operations, let's assume that a new program is developed. Can those operations go ahead without the accounting for the past 10, 12, 13 years, however long it is? So in other words, should the program wait until those things, the renewed program that is, wait until those accounts are finalized?
Well, in the past, with organizations that I have consulted for in the UK, there have been two broad approaches, with slight variations on each one. One approach says we terminate the existing company and we create a new company and start afresh. But we go back and do produce all the accounting for the old company. The other approach is, as I think you might expect, is that we carry on with the existing company, but we attempt to change processes and procedures, controls, and so on within that company, while at the same time have a special team that is going back and looking to bring all those out-of-date accounts up to date.
In our present circumstances, which one will you advocate?
I would advocate the former.
The former.
I say that for the accounting reasons I've described, the accounting and auditing reasons I've described, but also for management reasons. It would be easier for a new team to take hold based on their idea, their determination of what their aims and objectives are. Let them set out what they want to achieve and let them go forward and implement that without being hamstrung by
not having this thing hung around their necks. They're a free new company and they're going forward. And they're allowing for the past to investigate the past, as it were. Okay, so we're going to go for a break now, where Sir Charles will come in and tell us about the program, tell us about where you can get the program, and of course make it known to all of us, including those present, that we too need to audit funds, but we have to collect them first.
Yes.
At this point, we're not collecting, so we can't audit.
Right.
Right, Charles.
Real talk. Hell, your mid-morning just got better. Join Sir Charles for the mid-morning mix and mingle, where good music, real talk, health, and family matters come together, and your voice is heard. Whether you're at work, on the go, or just taking a break, this is the perfect mix to keep you engaged, informed, and entertained. The mid-morning mix and mingle, weekdays, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on New Era TT Radio, Nett Radio.
S&H Rumbox, 137 Western Main Road, St. James, for all your retail and wholesale needs for alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. Call us at 686-0599 or visit us at 137 Western Main Road, St. James. S&H Rumbox, drinking out of the box.
Looking for trusted, affordable security and property services? Horatio Services has you covered across Trinidad and Tobago. We offer battle security, canine patrols, 24/7 protection, and all sorts of private investigations, discreet, professional, and effective. But that's not all. We also provide construction. From building to renovation, we bring your vision to life. Landscaping, keep your outdoors looking sharp and inviting. Maintenance, repairs, upkeep, and everything in between. At Horatio Services, you get professionalism, reliability, and personal care. whether it's safety or property support you need. Visit us at Marino Street, Arima, or call 388-7070 today. Horatio Services, protection, precision, peace of mind.
Join me, Brother David Muhammad, every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio, Powerful Radio. Join me to hear knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Tuesdays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Advertise with us on New Era TT Radio, the fastest growing streaming platform for talk in Trinidad and Tobago. Audio and video ads welcome. Elevate your brand with us. Connect with us at newerattradio@yahoo.com or call us at 299-5156. Now what are you waiting for?
All right, everybody, as we welcome you back to the Drivetime Exchange right here. Of course, you're listening to New Era TT Radio, and you can find us on newerattradio.com. On TuneIn, you can get us at New Era TT Radio, and that way you'll be able to get us on all of your Alexa and Google devices. And we also stream to M&E TV in the morning between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And you can get us on M&E TV, which takes our feed to Digicel, Flow, Tricor, and Amplia, and a couple other stations in between there, right? So that is where you can find us. But once you put New Era TT Radio on your browser, you will definitely get us there. All right, so we are back inside of the Drivetime Exchange. So Tony, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Charlo. And so we go forward to this part of the program in which we expect to hear possibilities coming out initially from Dr. Atz, and of course, David Walker, an accountant, can also add in the discussion, join the discussion. Don't just wait for me to interact with Dr. Atz. You can also get in here. Dr. Atz, the critical issue now, as we go forward or hope to go forward, is that we fashion a program which can take care of immediate needs of people who are in the program, but also can assist them to becoming self-sufficient and to be able to go into the open economy and do well for themselves and their families. And as we indicated at the top of it, I think we all agreed that there must be a social welfare program. The great countries of the world have them, and we have to ensure that people have a way of earning revenue to live. Dr. Atz, what are the possibilities?
Well, Tony, the challenge, as I mentioned, is that we're now in a time where resources are not freely flowing, so we have to cut our cloth to suit. And this is going to be an issue, I'm sure, that is going to cause a lot of political indigestion, because the government is going to have to find, coming back to the conversation, Econ 101 about revenues and expenditures, the government is going to have to decide, looking at the situation, as politicians, but also looking at the situation in terms of the reality facing us, including the fact that we already, as a country, our public debt is inching up towards 80%. It's over 70 now, which means, again, just for clarification for your publics that viewing and listening, it means that for every dollar that we earn, $7 has to go to pay debt. So you're going to want to look at that and try push that up too much towards 80% or beyond. So the government has a very challenging time now looking at their expenditures. I mean, the revenue is already challenged from the energy sector side, and some of the other sources of revenue that would have been on the books up until when the previous government was in office. So they would have made estimates of revenue to come from things like the property taxes, etc. Those are no longer available. Those are no longer part of the revenue equation. So they're not going to go into the revenue basket. So I'm saying all of that as context for how do we manage our social welfare programs. And it is going to be an extremely delicate balance that the government is going to have to strike. So I want to park that thought there for a moment and get back to the point that Mr. Walker was suggesting, that we simply, he identified two scenarios, and perhaps moving forward, a fresh approach with a fresh set of metrics, a fresh mandate, starting sort of with a tabula rasa, so to speak, so that you can now say that, all right, yesterday was yesterday and today is today. Let us kind of move forward, try to identify who are vulnerable populations. We understand, and even as Mr. Walker was speaking, I was reflecting on the findings of the JSC 2020. Those accounts simply are not there, so I don't know that there's anything to go back to. The JSC it's very clear in the recommendations that just not there. And that was one of the things that the JSC was saying, that we needed to get these accounts, but they recognize that there are no accounts. So if we were to move forward, I think we have to be very clear in our minds the investment that is going to be put into this thing, whether it's Cepep 2.0 or Cepep 3.0 or whatever else it's going to be moving forward. When I think the Minister of Public Utilities indicated that a new board should be in place this week, or it's imminent, sometime a new board should be in place. I've not heard the announcement of the board, so I'm imagining that I didn't miss that bit of news. But whatever decision is taken has to balance the availability of funds, whether 500 million or thereabouts, because that's the number we kind of averaged out over the years, whether $500 million is available for this program, and what are going to be the metrics, the performance metrics that are going to be used for the board, what is going to be the mandate, what are going to be the objectives. But I think what has to underpin all of that would be the data. Who are we targeting? What are the expected outcomes? Are we going to maintain the original mandate that we're looking at skilled persons who are semi-skilled and unskilled? Are we going to be looking at female heads of households? There's, of course, going to be the geographic considerations throughout the program. And I think those data are going to be important. Is there an entry date? Is there a cutoff date? A date beyond which? So I think all of these are conversations that presumably will be had, and considerations that will inform the program moving forward. But the crux of the matter is, from my perspective, is if it is 500 million, and again, that is what we're simply throwing out there as an average. If it is 500 million, I think, given that we're in a space where 500 million is not as easily accessible as it used to be in the days gone by, the government is going to, and I'm sure that is one of the things that they're looking at, is going to have to very carefully calibrate what are going to be the returns on this investment, and how are we going to measure that, so that we don't repeat some of the errors of the past.
Yeah. David, any thoughts on that matter?
I had to unmute myself completely. Yes, I feel that there needs to be, in going forward with a new dispensation, I don't think we could do that simply by ignoring what's happened in the past. So we have to evaluate, I feel, what our initial objectives were, to what extent we've achieved them, and what are the elements within the old regime that we wish to keep and we wish to build upon. one of the considerations that has crossed my mind is that we should evaluate whether the way the operation is structured presently is the ideal way. As I understand it, it is the Cepep organization that pays the workers directly based on timesheets submitted by the contractors. I would prefer to see a system where the contractor is exactly that, a contractor, and gets a contract to perform some particular type of exercise on my street. And the contractor bids for that, wins the contract, and then employs people from a certain pool who fit the criteria. And they are then responsible for all the mechanics of paying the people. It greatly simplifies the management and the reporting at the top level by Cepep. But whether it meets the social requirements as described by Dr. Axe is something that would have to be evaluated to know whether that would be adequate in order to achieve the desired objective. Now, the desired objectives include bringing people, elevating people from where they are when they first enter the system. And I do believe this quite strongly, that placing more responsibility on both the contractor at the first level and then the employee who is being managed by the contractor, I strongly believe that that provides a much better incentive mechanism for the contractor to improve their skills so that they could go and earn contracts elsewhere. And likewise, if they are managing their employees properly, those employees would then have a better resume to go out into the open market. As it stands presently, it seems to me that neither the contractors nor the employees, the workers, have any incentive or even opportunity to upskill while working in Cepep.
But I think, David, I think that is the point, and I agree with you in principle. But the fact of the matter is that the majority of the persons who are in the program at the level of the employees, they, you use the word resume. Many of them probably don't, can't begin to populate a resume in the way in which we understand it. So there is a need for some intervention, that upskilling to which you refer, and perhaps what could be part of the way forward is including within the company, the program, that training component so that you know who the people are on the ground because you have hired them. You would have had a process of collecting the data on where they are in terms of, that skill spectrum, and therefore using that component of the program to help with that upskilling, because left to themselves, the fact that they're part of the program means that they're the low end of the skill spectrum. So I think it would be, I think it is a bit ambitious to think that they would then be able to take responsibility to kind of populate a resume or to upskill, as the case might be. So from what you've discussed, it seems to me that perhaps one of the things that can be embedded in moving forward in the program is a training component, because you're on the ground, you know who these people are, you know what their requirements are, what their needs are, where they are in terms of semi-skilled, unskilled, so to speak, and you can then kind of, frame and adapt programs to suit them. Because as I said, in the first part of my intervention some minutes ago, I'm thinking of school leaving. That's where my mind is. Some people might actually be at the school leaving level where you have to give them a little bit of everything to get them to some levels of numeracy and literacy, etc., and then you build on that moving forward. So if we are to maintain the same kind of participants in the program, those persons who are semi-skilled and who are unskilled and semi-skilled, then we will have to meet them where they are and try to help them do the upskilling that is required, things like computer literacy all of these, all of these kinds of things that we, that we take for granted as basic skills, and get them to a point where we can then, allow them to self-actualize and to move on, and to move on to that resume building that Mr. Walker was referring to.
So if I ask the question now, what are we going to do with the programs as they exist? Are we going to continue asking people to cut the sidewalks, the grass on the sidewalks, to trim whatever trees and so on? I'm not saying that those are not important things, but they don't contribute in a productive. And again, I'm putting a little caveat there. Of course, they're productive. You don't want to have a sidewalk that is full of grass and so on. But I'm saying that something
matter.
yeah. A productive engagement which can return revenue to them and to the rest of the national community. So, what kinds of programs do you want to put them into?
I would like to see, personally, we've talked a lot about agriculture. I would love to see Cepep involved in agriculture. So providing something that is tangible for the national community, but also for themselves. And by extension, something like horticulture, so that there is something that there is an output. So yes, the grass cutting, etc., is important because the aesthetic of the country is important. And I have worked with Cepep personally during COVID-19. One of my responsibilities at that time, I was very close to Cepep because Cepep provided a lot of support for the country. I don't know that people are aware of that, in that Cepep essentially went around the country ensuring that things were kept, grass was cut, etc., etc. When persons couldn't come out to work, Cepep was very heavily involved in that. So that grass cutting is important, but I think that there is an opportunity, even as we talk about agriculture, and it is something that is near and dear to me, that this is an opportunity, that our space where I think Cepep can also find an opportunity to be productive and contribute to the national economy in a way that, that is a lot more tangible, and we can actually see them earning revenues. So Cepep can become, find some kind of alignment with NAMDEVCO, for example, so the output is sold, have relationships with supermarkets, so that output from Cepep goes into to certain supermarkets, as it were, and it is branded. So there is the sense of pride in terms of the produce, but there is also money. There is a return. There is a return in terms of what you sell to a supermarket, or you sell as part of the school feeding program. There are a number of ways I think that we can imagine tangible outcomes associated and tangible outputs associated with this program to complement grass cutting, as it were, and
when
also skills building.
When we had the first episode of this program, we had Farmer Shiraz Khan on, and I'm sure that everybody knows Shiraz.
Shiraz, of course.
And Shiraz talked about a program, an agricultural program that he put forward to the government 10 years, 15 years ago, in which, and if you think about, I am sure Dr. Adsa and Mr. Walker understand and know the food import bill. At one time we used to be, I remember clearly when we did these programs, we used to scream and shout about it at being $5 billion. Well, it's $7 billion now and counting. Yes, so that agricultural programs, we have a whole field that is open there for us.
No pun intended, a field that is open, of course, because again, coming back to the economy and the state of the economy, 15, 20, 30 years ago, and not quite 30, a food import bill, one of the reasons that our food import bill is so high is because we could always afford it. There was always money from the energy sector. The fact is that the winds have changed, circumstances have changed, and we have to find novel ways of addressing a number of issues simultaneously. So we have to deal with the social welfare programs. I imagine there is going to be a recalibration of not only the Cepep, but some of the other programs as well, because the issue is that we have financial constraints. The food import bill, as you correctly said, Tony, is simply spiraling out of control. There was a CARICOM initiative to reduce the CARICOM food import bill, because what is happening is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but this is where we are. So we're talking about our national circumstances. There was a CARICOM initiative to reduce the food import bill in the region by 30% by 2030. And that is just around the corner. So every opportunity I think that we have to address that from our national perspective saves us foreign exchange. Because when we talk about the food import bill, it's nice to say $7 billion, but this is really foreign exchange we're talking about. And we know that we have a challenge with respect to the foreign exchange in the country at this time. So, any opportunity that we have to kind of help us manage the scarce forex that we have in the country, I think that will be welcome. And if we can grow more local food, produce more for our consumption, tie that in to, let's say, programs like the Cepep agriculture programs, bring our farmers in, have linkages with supermarkets, with things like our school feeding program, where there is a local content. I think there already is, but there is a local content so that you create the demand, you create the scale that allows for us to produce and to consume more food locally. I think that it wouldn't quite create a dent, but it will certainly help us in terms of changing the culture and helping us along that path of trying to manage the number of issues that are facing us now, including the foreign exchange, the food import bill, and trying to find ways that we can really be more productive and redound to the national benefit.
David?
Yeah, I would like to go back to the issue of helping to upskill the people involved in Cepep, because to me that is one of the primary objectives of Cepep. I certainly believe that given the right structure, what we need to do, I feel, is to have the upskilling of not just the workers, but the contractors as well, as a critical deliverable. So it must be perceived as a deliverable, it must be planned for as a deliverable, not just something that falls out by the wayside. So instead of getting involved in paying Joe, Jane, Harry, and so on, let the Cepep focus a great deal of their attention and have people dedicated to the task of working with both the contractors and the workers, enabling them almost become a kind of education facility, or maybe a facility that helps them to get into education to improve themselves. Because even if we deal with the financial controls side of it, which is what started a lot of this discussion, we need to get back, I feel, to dealing with the issue of how do we utilize this facility in order to open doors for the people who have come into it, so that they come out of it better than they entered into it, and hopefully within a maximum of 2 to 3 years, rather than what we have now. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. Not only is it long-term employment for some people, but it's actually intergenerational. We have to try to find a way to move away from that. And that is what, more than anything else, I would like to see coming out of it.
Yeah. David, as you talked about the intergenerational element of it, I saw a video recently, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, when this thing started. I saw young people, people in their early 20s, perhaps. The regular kind of Cepep worker that we see, people at 50 and 60 and even over that. But these were young people in their early 20s. So that's what, 3-4 generations of people are going by. And from what they were saying, they fully expect that they would get Cepep jobs as their natural right. And I want to throw a little bit of politics into this, into you fellas talking nice economic programming and all of that. And I am absolutely certain that when this, well, the objective of it in the first instance with regard to this government stopping the program and firing the contractors and saying they're going to do a review and so on, it is really to get their own people, their own political supporters into the program to pay them off for the electoral support. And I'm not saying that is a feature of the UNC or it's a creation of the UNC. It's a creation of the politics of the country. And so my spanner into the works of those nice programs is how do you get the government of the day and any in government, in fact, to back off from the political intervention into this program, whatever you call it.
Well, this would be one of the greatest challenges of the legislation that I so openly proclaim. That is our procurement legislation. The procurement legislation, in theory, is designed and implemented in order to ensure that we engage in the best contracts for the use of public funds. I have been doing a lot of work with some organizations, and there is scope for improvement, but in this particular instance, I am unsure as to whether even the procurement legislation as it stands now will be able to deliver on its promise of essentially the most cost-effective and beneficial procurement of services on behalf of the nation, because that is what we want. And Dr. Arts, I don't think you've seen the same studies I have seen, but it is held that something between 20 and 40% of national income is lost to corruption and incompetence in government spending. Even if we take it at a fraction of that, in something like Cepep, it would mean that we should be able to operate Cepep efficiently at 20% less than we're spending right now. Take that across the board.
And David, my cynicism to you is how do you do that with politicians looking for voter banks? They're planning from now. Local government elections is about what, two years into the future, and you can bet your bottom dollar that what this government is seeking to do is to insert its own people who campaigned for it into that system. And what the PNM, lest anybody think I am anti-UNC, I am anti both of them, actually, for the record. And what the PNM is attempting to do with all of these legal matters and so on is to win back political support for them. How do you take that animal, that political animal, out of the equation?
But Tony, if I may, I mean, I think that horse has bolted. That horse has bolted, unfortunately, because politics is inextricably linked and woven into the fabric of many of these welfare programs that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not saying that is a good thing, but that horse has bolted. So you talk about the food cards. If we pull out the food cards, for example, at some point in time, you will hear some political noise around the food card that people give their people food cards, etc., etc. The only thing that probably is not as mired in the politics is the pension. I think the pension is fairly straightforward. You apply, it's not the easiest process, but you apply and you get a pension regardless of whether you wear red, yellow, green, blue, or whatever the case might be. But unfortunately, the politics are heavily interwoven into the psyche of not just programs like Cepep, but also everything, but people have also come to accept it. So it's not just the politicians themselves, the population thrive on a diet of being politically aligned. So what you're asking to happen is not easily, there's no easy solution to that, because people, I mean, you open the newspapers and everything is broken into political noise, either yellow noise or red noise or some other color noise. Everything is digested and consumed from a political perspective. That is so much part of our psyche. Well, I'm using the first person plural, but it's really not a diet that I consume, that people see it like that. So if they need to turn up in Woodford Square because they think that their next contract is going to be dependent on being in Woodford Square, they will do that. They don't really care what Woodford Square has to say to them, but they will go because they think their contract is dependent on that. If they think they need to turn up in Rienzi Complex or somewhere else, they will do that because they think their contract. So the people themselves, we the people, really fuel that kind of politicization of our systems, and to extricate and to unravel that and to create a new thing really requires a total overhaul, not just of our political and our procurement systems, but how we, the people, think our country should be operating, and we, the people, how we think we should navigate systems in our country, because we see everything through a political lens.
Interesting. Ferdy is one of the gems of this country because he was there from the start of this whole political anti-colonial decolonization, whatever you choose to call it, system. And Ferdy said a very interesting thing to me. He said that the Cepep workers, whatever you call them, Cepep workers tricked the government. When the governments felt that they had a hold on the Cepep workers joined the PNM, according to him. So therefore, the PNM, they became the PNM people. And therefore, you can't fire your own people. You can't require them to work too hard because they are there to support you in the electoral system that exists. So those people have impacted themselves on the government. So I believe you that it is not an easy jumbie to shake off our backs, if at all that we could shake it. I don't know what David thinks.
That was one of my considerations when I came up with the idea of having the contractors employ the persons directly and pay them directly. Now, it is not a 100% solution. In fact, I don't even know if it's a 20% solution. But you take the decision making as to who gets employed to go and cut the grass on Frederick Street or whatever street out of the hands of the politicians and the direct political appointees and put it in the hands of the contractors. Now, the contractor wants to make $1 or as many as he or she can. Therefore, they're going to be looking for efficiency out of those workers. Because in my vision, these will be fixed price contracts. So it's then up to the contractor to perform on those contracts in order to make a profit, subject to legislative and other considerations, minimum wage, health and safety, and so on. So they aren't able to just do whatever they like, to whoever they like. And that was one of the reasons that I felt that would be a way forward that will achieve several objectives. It is not going to solve the problem, but if we could make a dent in it, I feel that gives us a start that we could then build upon. We see how it goes, to tweak it, or find other ways. But I don't feel that for me, it's not a viable option to carry on as we are. I think Marlene was correct. That's not going to change because of the reality of politics. Now, it may be that politicians will never implement something like that because they'll recognize that they don't have the control that they once had.
Yeah, and let me heap some more firewood on Dr. Atz. She's able to deal with that. One element of the program which I saw in Jamaica. I was a student in Jamaica way back whenever. Tells you how old I am. The militarization of those programs, whatever they call it in Jamaica, and what has happened here, it has not been militarized, it has been bargeonized or perhaps criminalized is a better word. I have great respect for the long-time bargeon. These fellas are criminals. It's a different kind of story. So you have the criminal element within these programs. It is no dream or anything that there was a man who got killed in the John area who owned several programs and he fed out, etc., etc., etc.
And let's be honest, Tony, my understanding, I mean, again, it's not my area of expertise, but my understanding is that also has some political color and flavor as well. So if you combine all of these things, which string do you pull first? So if we are to accept what we read by some persons who are better schooled than I am in terms of criminology and what is happening around us and some of the untold stories, etc. All of these things, so the politics, the dependency, the culture, the antisocial behaviors, some of the illegal activities, etc., they're all interwoven. And as I said, it is not a good place to start, and particularly since you have young people becoming involved in these programs. So therefore their socialization is going to be in this toxic, unsavory, unhealthy kind of environment. But the fact of the matter is that these streams have been allowed to flow into rivers, and these things have morphed into establishments that we can't soon demolish. In any one political cycle, you can't demolish them because they've become so much ingrained as part of our culture. For many of the people who participate and many of the people who benefit from, so not all of the participants are the beneficiaries. Some of the beneficiaries don't even know where Cepep headquarters is or any one of these other programs. I don't want to single out Cepep per se, because there are a number of other areas where we see this kind of lack of transparency, lack of accountability, mixed in with a culture, mixed in with the politics, and it's the lay of the land. The idea is, how do we move forward? And that's what I want us to kind of focus on, because the days of glory where we had money flowing through the country, those days, we're not quite enjoying those kinds of days anymore. And I think moving forward, we have to find the best possible way to deal with the situations and deal with some of the circumstances that we have created as a country.
Mm-hmm.
We have to take collective responsibility for having created some of these things. I mean, the fact that a company could run $6 billion later, and we're here kind of saying, well, shock, horror, and consternation. How could this have happened? This is our money. This is the people's money. So we have allowed these things to happen. We have allowed these situations to arise. But I think what we want to do now, what I would suggest, is that we figure out how best to move forward with some of the lessons from the past, some of the things that we determine what we could live with, what we can't live with, and what we absolutely need to improve moving forward, because we want at the end of the day for us to contribute to a better Trinidad and Tobago. So how do we navigate that space? And if it is we have to find opportunities in agriculture, that is going to redound to the benefit of the country. If we have to find ways to upskill, that is going to redound to the benefit of the country and to the individuals. I dream, for example, for some of those 20-year-olds in Cepep, I dream of seeing them becoming receptionists in offices where they can, put on their nice clothes and go to work, and type, do some things on a computer. That is how I would like to see some of the ladies in Cepep, evolve over time, so that they can be in a better position to help themselves, to help their families moving on. So that has to be the vision, the collective vision that we have for Trinidad and Tobago. And these individuals also have to have that vision for themselves. And if they don't have it for themselves, David made the point about incentive or the big stick. Somebody's going to have to say, well, you have 6 months to be inside of here, and then after that, you're on your own.
Right. Dr. Atz, I hear you saying something which has just triggered a thought in my mind about the focus on women in the program. I'm not knocking it. In fact, I'm saying that it's probably a good thing to start at a point, a particular kind of group. You talk about motherhood, you talk about bringing a family together, and so on, so that women can be influential in terms of making a transformation in the system. Is that possible? Is that circulating in your mind?
Is that to my recollection is when the program started, that was one of the objectives. Whether it was stated explicitly, it was focusing on female heads of households, single mothers who, fell into that semi-skilled, unskilled cohort, trying to give them the opportunity to earn some income. They wouldn't be dependent on any particular teacher and father or those kinds of things. They'd be able to earn some income and help themselves and help their families. I don't know if that is still a core objective, if it ever was. I think it was, but yeah, I don't know if it's still a core objective. But again, we need to have the data, because as much as I will talk about female heads of households, there are also single fathers. So we need the data to understand exactly who are we targeting in this program and these kinds of programs, and what interventions will be appropriate depending on their particular needs. We can't be all things to all persons, but I think we need to start with the data. It can't just be that somebody gets up one morning and decides they're going to look for a Cepep walk. Who are we catering for? And where do we hope to meet them, and where do we hope to take them when they come out of this program?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. And we need to have that kind of philosophical framework that we're working with, as opposed to something that simply absorbs a lot of money on an annual basis, and we're not too sure if we're getting anywhere with it, or if we simply just throwing money, after this program, and we're not too sure if we're achieving any outcomes. If we're clear what the outcome should be, and if we are in fact meeting those outcomes.
I don't want to heap areas of responsibility which neither of you come with credentials for. But there is the need to deal with the violence of young people. How do you get them out of that mindset? I used to know a fellow, Hal Graves.
Yes,
he was
right.
actor and so on. And,
he was an activist, an advocate, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he worked in the Laventille areas. And I had a series of programs with him, actually just before he passed on. And he taught me a lot about what he experienced in these areas, about the criminals influencing 8 and 9-year-old boys. Hold a piece there for me. So when the police come, they go come by you.
Yes, that's right.
And you can get a little something more out of it. So that is something additional, that you have to break the criminal culture in those areas, which is an additional kind of thing.
I'm not a criminologist, but I do look at the data on crime and youth involvement in crime, and we have increasingly a disturbing number of young persons, youth involved in crime. So hold a piece, hold a gun, hold a this, hold a that, the police wouldn't check you. And I always come back to education, because if a 9-year-old is available to be on the block to participate in some of these activities, it means that he or she, and I'm not discriminating by gender here, he or she is not in school. And we have to ask ourselves the question, why is a 9-year-old not in school? Because that means that the trajectory is that 9-year-old is likely not going to be literate if they're not in school at 9. So we have to look at it in a multifaceted way. And the reason that he or she may not be in school could be because the mother or father has gone to work and left them on their own. So they're just doing what they want. It could be that the mother or father doesn't care. It could be that the mother or father is unable, for whatever reason, to look after them. So we need to have a multifaceted approach in terms of how we address these things. I am not a criminologist. We can't address, but I do believe that we can't address crime in terms of the outcome, the number of people who get killed, and the number of 9-year-olds and 14-year-olds who holding up people and getting involved in violent crime. That is the outcome. We need to look at the ecosystem that led to that, which could include that they've not been able to go to school. I mean, one of the things that has always concerned me, and the concern, came to mind again when, we were talking about the results from the SCA exam. Children who wrote SCA this year at 11 would have been 6 years old during COVID-19. And I don't know what, if any, evaluation, assessment, analytical work was taking place to understand the circumstances of those 6-year-olds at that time. I know during COVID-19, I would go to the supermarket and I would see merchandisers with their children going from aisle to aisle, because the merchandiser's phone was also the phone that the child was using to do schoolwork. So they'll be there from aisle to aisle trying to of course, not paying attention, but the mother or the father, to their credit, because I saw both a man and a woman at different points in time, they would be there trying to get the child to do it, but they're really not focusing. So I think as a country, as you know, as much as we are trying to grapple with the scourge of crime, I think we also need to understand what are some of those triggers and some of those factors that are causing our youth, our 9 and our 10 and our 11 and 12-year-old youth, to be comfortable, engaging in these kinds of activities, and then finding themselves in ecosystems and spaces where, crime is one of the components of that particular ecosystem. So
yeah, and one issue in it, and I don't want to raise this as an issue for us to deal with today, just to recognize it, is that some of these children are born to 15-year-old mothers.
Absolutely.
Who have no capacity really to bring up these children. It's not like the extended family of you might have a grandmother who got Felina and so on. The grandmother herself might be about 30
Yes.
and has been in difficult situation. I can
Absolutely.
tell you, I did an interview, must have been 15, 20 years ago, with a woman in Bisam Estate. We had gone to do some investigative work there, and I spoke to this young lady who told me she was 28, and we were in her little apartment there, and I saw all these millions of little children going in and out. So I thought I was the neighborhood children. Well, she told me all 10 of them are hers. I was stumped. How can I ask this lady anything? I'm simply not qualified to ask her. She should start asking me questions and telling me about the difficult life that she has had and so on. But I want to go to David as we wind down.
I sent you a message, Tony, that I don't know if Charles has got the message. I sent a message on the chat. I tried to message you. Because I need to jump off soon.
Yeah, we're gonna finish in 2 minutes from now. I'm just allowing David to say his final piece, and then we get out of here. David, it's one instance, incidentally, where the woman won't have the last say. Sorry. Right, David.
Well, Tony, I don't know if I should craft a medal to honor you. Anyway, I am very, very, very pleased with the discussion we have had today. I personally have learned a lot. I believe there is a sensible way forward, but there are options that we have to explore. This is not going to be an overnight solution. If we think we're going to implement something to revive a Cepep or its successor that will work exactly as we wanted to work and deliver all the benefits we wanted to deliver within a year or two, we might as well forget it. This is going to be has to be an incremental approach. I believe strongly that the goals that were set for Cepep and its predecessors deserve to be accomplished, and therefore we need to persevere and come up with solutions. I have offered one. Marlene has offered several suggestions. I know there are lots of other people outside there with suggestions. We need to go through all of these and come up with the best way forward, so that in 10 years' time, we look back at what was, and we see that we now have a system that delivers to people, and that people can come through the system and be improved in the passage of time over 2 or 3 years from what they were, so that it becomes a pipeline through which people elevate themselves and can see a better future.
David Walker, thank you very much for coming to talk to us, and especially your guidance with regard to the whole business of auditing the reports and going through them, and how we could start off and so on. And economist Dr. Marlene Atz, who we're going to soon be reporting on her as she takes her stand as an independent senator in the National Parliament. And we're going to be following both of you. And Dr. Atz, you know, we reporters, we have a kind of thing when we latch on to somebody that we think we have a good thing there going, we're going to be at your doorstep every Monday morning. Hope you don't throw me out too many times. Thanks again for being with us. And Charlo, over to you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you for the guests passing through. Thank you very much, people, for being here on New Era TT Radio. Tony, I'm playing you this one. This is one of these sparrows we did not play in the last couple of days.
Okay.
Natasha from Nigeria didn't have a chance. She just had to dance with the freedom of my rhythm. In she sexy body, she then said to me, your music is sweet, I really love the beat. It's the living thing, makes me feel to sing. Olori egbe ho makurere onio. O siwa so good do hear me. O digba morio. O yina lafia ba wasire onio. Hey! We was right in Festac Village, only music on my mind. Brother, when I start to whine to the tempo of Calypso, she said, I love you, Sparrow, I can't let you go. Much to my delight, your music is right, your music is bright, it is all a sight. Olori egbe ho makurere onio, o siwa so good do hear me. O digba morio, o yina lafia ba wasere o.